Hi guys, my name is Uffe Hansen and I'm with TC Electronic. In this video I'm going to tell you a little bit about the front panel controls of the RH450. Now in developing the RH450 what we wanted to do was a great bass amp with enough power, great sound and just a little bit of extra convenience that kind of fit the bass player's everyday life. So that's what RH450 really is. Now, one of the first things that we realized when looking at bass players is the fact that a lot of players actually bring tuners to their gig. And a lot of amps already in the market have connectors that are called tuner out, quarter-inch connectors where you can connect your tuner to. But we kind of thought, why not just build the tuner into the amp instead? So that's exactly what we've done. This up here is a full-on chromatic bass tuner that allows you to tune anything 4-string, 5-string, 6-string bass at any point in time. The tuner is always on, so you can always turn around and check that you're in tune or tune up in between songs or before playing or whatever you prefer. Looking at the rest of the front panel over here, you'll see that these are pretty standard controls. So it's a very familiar user interface despite the many LEDs that we have on the front panel here. So very standard controls. Starting out here on the left-hand side is the input, a pretty common feature for a bass amp. What's special about the input of the RH450 is the fact that it covers both passive and active basses. So in other words, the gain range that you get on the gain knob right here allows you to connect anything from 60s vintage type basses and all the way up to the really active basses that you can buy today. Moving further along, we have a tone control section. Again, very standard thing that anybody can operate. We have a bass control, we have a low mid, we have a high mid, and we have a treble controller. Really straightforward. This allows you obviously to sculpt your sound, make the sound that you want with your bass. Just tweak the knobs until you like what you hear, and you're up and running. That's it though. We wanted to add a little more convenience for the guys who prefer to change their sound a little bit more than just by the 4 tone controls. So in fact, all 4 tone controls are semi-parametric bands. Or in other words, you can actually change where the tone controls grab your bass sound. The way you do that is by pressing the shift button right here. Now if I press shift, I get access to the center frequencies of each of the 4 tone controls. So I can now change where they grab my sound. So let's say I wanted to change where my low mid was operating. I've hit the shift button. I can now change the focus point of the low mid parameter, hit shift again, and then add the low mid that I like. This is possible with all 4 controls. Now if you're not a guy that really likes semi-parametric EQs, just use the tone controls as on any other amp. Very straightforward. Moving a step further on the front panel, we have something that we call TubeTone. Now, RH450 is obviously not a tube amp, as you can probably tell from the size and the sheer looks of the amp. But we did think that we wanted to have something in there that would kind of add, the nice warm tube sound that we all kind of like to play with. TubeTone is a simulation of a tube amp. And we looked at a number of ways of doing this, and we realized that just doing the preamp section didn't really cut it. I mean, we looked at a ton of the different classic tube amps and realized the fact that if you want to get just remotely close to what they sound like, you have to have both the preamp and the power amp in the simulation, otherwise you don't really get the right sound. So that's what TubeTone is essentially. The way we've done it is that we have a preamp section that is before the tone controls, and then we have a power amp section after the tone controls. So in other words, we're simulating the full-on signal path of a tube amp in here, and we've made it really, really simple for you to operate. So you just dial it up from just a little bit of warm sound and all the way up to a regular overdrive. So that's TubeTone for you. Right next to TubeTone, we have the master knob, which controls the 450 watts of RH450. Pretty straightforward thing. Now, we did talk about the shift button already, but actually when you hit that, there's a couple of other things that it allows you to do. Hitting the shift button and turning the gain knob actually gives you access to something that we call SpectraComp, as you'll see here on the front panel. Now, compression for bass players can sometimes be a little bit complicated. What we found when talking to players is that a lot of guys have checked out compression and played with it, but a lot of guys have trouble actually getting it to sound right. It tends to kind of kill the bass dynamics when you're playing with compression, And one of the reasons for this is that a lot of compressors out there are actually full band compressors. So in essence, they compress the entire frequency range the same way, which for bass players means that it'll compress the E string and the G string identically. Now, what that means in practical life is that the strings with the more energy, meaning the E string in this case, would be controlling the compression. So it kind of gives you the pumping kind of feel, and it kind of kills your dynamics when you're playing your lower strings. SpectraComp is a little bit different from that. SpectraComp is in essence a multi-band compression, or virtually a per string compression. It's a 3-band compressor that allows you to compress the lows and the mids and the highs completely independently. So what that really means is that you get something that is much more transparent, but still allows you to get the kind of snappy thing that you really want from a compressor to give you the tone that's right there and in your face without really killing all your dynamics. So that's SpectraComp. Again, hit the shift button, turn it up on the gain knob, and you've added compression. Really, really simple. Up here, we have a few buttons that we haven't talked about yet. These are the 3 memory buttons. Now, I realize that we bass players mostly have just one sound, right? And that's what we saw when starting to develop RH450 as well. That said, though, we did see quite a few players who had, several basses or different finger styles that they played. So if let's say you have a passive bass versus an active bass that you're playing with at the same gig, that actually might change your sound. They might actually have different settings on the tone controls and also different settings on the gain. So we thought, well, what if we could add just a few buttons up here and make it really easy for you bass players to store your sound during sound check, and just by hitting one simple button you could get back to exactly the sound that you tailored for, let's say, your classic 60s jazz bass, for instance. So the way this works is that you make your sound, you set your gain, turn the tone controls, and then when you're ready to save or store your sound, press and hold the memory button for about a second, and you've stored the sound. So I can now go on and do something different, press and hold, and I've stored it. So now by pushing once again, I get back to my first sound. Really, really easy. Done in a split second, and car radio style memories. So just press and hold like on any car radio and you've stored your sound. Very, very straightforward and very, very handy. Finally, we have a studio quality headphone output. The headphone output is something that has been done on numerous amps out there, but we thought, well, finally we have something that's light enough that can travel, where you don't have to have cabinets connected, where it actually does make sense to have a headphone output. You could actually now bring it home and play it in your flat or your hotel room or wherever. So very nice extra feature on the front panel here. That's the quick overview of the RH450 front panel. If you want to check out some of the back panel features or want to check out some of the features more specifically, have a look at the other videos.